After the invasion. After the alien invasion that nearly tore Earth apart, life was forever changed. Humanity had fought back hard enough to drive the invaders away, but not without loss and scars. In this new world, everything felt fragile. But at least I had Liv, my best friend and the bravest person I knew, who had saved so many lives during the battles. I woke up on Liv's couch that morning, stretching out with a sense of lingering exhaustion. Their house was quiet, and I could smell bacon and pancakes from the kitchen. When I walked in, there she was, smiling as she cooked, looking as fierce and beautiful as always. "Good morning, Em," she greeted with that easy smile of hers. "You slept like a log. Saving the world is tiring, huh?" I grinned, yawning. "Yeah, you could say that. So what's the plan today?" "I was thinking we could walk through the city. People are probably shaken up after everything." Classic Liv, always thinking of others first. We ate breakfast quietly, both lost in thought about everything that had changed. The city, the people, even us. Afterward, we pulled on our jackets and headed out, ready to see what was left of the world we knew. Walking through the streets, it was heartbreaking. Buildings that once stood strong were now crumbling, and debris littered the sidewalks. Only a few people were out, cautiously taking in the aftermath of the invasion. I remembered Liv, so brave and unflinching as she fought, saving everyone she could. I'd never felt so proud, or so afraid, watching her put herself on the line. "It's all so different now," Liv said, a shadow passing over her face. "Do you think we're safe? That this is really over?" I hugged her tightly, inhaling her warm cinnamon scent. "Whatever happens next, we'll get through it together. We always do." She gave a small smile, and we headed back to her house, both of us feeling the weight of everything we'd been through. In her room, Liv curled up on her bed while I sat beside her. After a long silence, she spoke up, her voice soft and uncertain. "Do you think our families are safe, wherever they are?" I nodded. "They'll be okay. They're strong, just like you. Besides, they taught us everything we know." Liv looked over at me, worry still lingering in her gaze. "I miss them, Em." "I know," I whispered, holding her hand. "But they'd want us to be strong, to protect what's left here. They'd want us to look out for each other." A quiet understanding settled between us. Liv's hand in mine was steady and warm, and as we held each other's gaze, the words I'd held back for so long found their way out. "I love you, Liv." She smiled, her eyes softening. "I love you too, Emma." We stayed like that, talking late into the night about what we'd been through and what lay ahead. It wasn't the world we'd known, but as long as we had each other, I knew we could face it. For the first time, we let the worry slip away, leaning on each other in that quiet room, finding strength in the promise that we'd never be alone. As we prepared for the unknown future, I felt a renewed sense of hope. With Liv by my side, I knew we could build something new, something beautiful, out of the ruins. Together, we were unstoppable. In the days that followed, Liv and I settled into a new routine. Mornings were quiet, usually filled with coffee, the occasional pancake breakfast, and moments spent listening to the soft hum of the city as it tried to rebuild. People were coming back, cautiously emerging from the ruins, and our little community was finding ways to heal. The government still controlled most of the major areas, making plans and assigning crews to restore power, clear rubble, and establish safe zones. But as things started to resemble some semblance of normalcy, Liv and I were still adjusting. It felt strange to have survived something so monumental, to walk through these cracked streets with memories of the invasion looming large in our minds. Sometimes, Liv would zone out, her gaze distant as though seeing something terrible beyond the skyline. And I'd hold her hand or give her shoulder a squeeze, a quiet promise that I was here. One evening, as we sat on the edge of what had once been a vibrant city park now scattered with wild growth, Liv spoke up, her voice soft and thoughtful. Do you ever wonder why us? Why we made it through and others didn't? I thought about that for a moment, my hand tracing gentle patterns in the dirt. Sometimes. I mean, we were prepared in a way, thanks to our parents. And we had each other. Maybe that made all the difference. She nodded, leaning back against a broken bench. I think it did. I don't think I could have faced any of this alone. And it's kind of scary to realize that. I looked at her, seeing the way the setting sun cast a warm glow on her face. You don't have to face anything alone, Liv. I'm here. Always. She gave a quiet smile, her fingers brushing against mine. We sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened, watching as a few early stars peeked out. It was in those quiet moments, the ones where words felt unnecessary, that I felt closest to her. The world was quieter now, still bruised and healing, but here in these small moments, we were at peace. The next day, we volunteered to help one of the crews setting up a community space in the old library building. We spent hours moving boxes, sweeping up dust and debris, and helping organize what remained of the library's books. It felt good to work, to focus on building something again. Liv worked tirelessly, her focus unwavering, and I couldn't help but admire her strength. She'd always been my hero, even before the invasion. After a long day, we collapsed into one of the library's old armchairs, laughing over our exhaustion. A book lay on the arm of the chair, and Liv picked it up, flipping through its faded pages. Do you remember this one? She asked, holding it up. It was a novel we'd both read in school, a story of courage and survival. How could I forget? I laughed. We spent hours debating that ending. Liv chuckled, flipping to the last page. I still think they could have made it if they'd just trusted each other. I raised an eyebrow. So, kind of like us. She paused, a small smile tugging at her lips. Maybe. Guess they just didn't know what we do. And what's that? That no matter what the world throws at us, we're stronger together, she said, looking at me with a fierce determination that warmed my heart. The world may have changed, but here, in this quiet library, with her by my side, I knew one thing was certain: whatever lay ahead, Liv and I would face it hand in hand. And somehow, that was enough. As the days turned into weeks, Liv and I fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. The city continued to rebuild, and each day brought new challenges and small victories. The sense of loss and change was still heavy, but together, we found ways to cope, whether it was working with the community or simply sharing quiet moments over coffee, making plans for a future that felt uncertain but full of possibilities. One evening, as we were finishing up a community meeting in the town square, I noticed Liv standing off to the side, her gaze focused on the distant skyline. She looked deep in thought, and I knew by now to give her a moment to gather herself. But when she finally turned to me, her expression was one of calm certainty. She began, her voice steady, I think we should talk about our parents. About finding them. The topic had been a silent weight between us ever since the invasion. Neither of us had heard from them, though we'd been told they were safe in government-protected zones. Still, the thought of them lingered in our minds, unspoken but ever-present. Part of me was terrified of what we'd find if we went searching, but the other part, the part that had survived the invasion and grown stronger beside Liv, felt ready. I think you're right, I said finally, feeling a strange mix of nerves and excitement. Her face softened. Really? Yes. It's about time we tried. Over the next few days, we prepared ourselves as best as we could. We gathered supplies, packed a small bag each, and made a list of government safe houses where our parents could possibly be. It was risky to leave our community behind for a while, but we had enough support that we felt confident they would manage without us. When the morning of our departure arrived, the city was blanketed in a gentle fog, and the streets felt eerily quiet. Liv tightened the straps of her pack and gave me a reassuring smile. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining with the familiar ease we'd found in each other. "Ready, Em?" she asked, her voice both gentle and unwavering. "Let's do this," I replied, my heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. The journey was long, with stretches of deserted roads and towns that had been nearly leveled. We camped out beneath the stars, sharing stories and memories to keep our spirits up. Liv always managed to find something to laugh about, and her sense of humor kept me going, even on the hardest days. When exhaustion set in, she would encourage me to rest, promising to keep watch, though more often than not, we'd end up both falling asleep under the same blanket. One night, as we sat beside a small campfire, she turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "Do you remember the summers we spent at the lake?" she asked, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. I nodded, smiling at the memory. How could I forget? We would spend hours swimming and exploring the woods. Those were the best days. She leaned back, gazing up at the star-studded sky. I miss those days. But I think I like these ones too. I looked at her, surprised. Even after everything. She smiled, her hand reaching for mine. Especially after everything. We're stronger now. And we've got each other. For a moment, we sat in silence, the warmth of the fire casting a gentle glow over us. I felt a wave of gratitude for her, for the journey we'd taken, for the bond we'd forged in the most difficult of times. Whatever happened next, I knew that as long as we were together, we could face it. Eventually, we reached the government safe house. It was nestled in a quiet, hidden valley, far from the devastation we'd left behind. After a series of security checks, we were finally allowed inside. The air was tense as we walked through the stark, sterile halls, my pulse quickening with every step. Then, suddenly, we saw them, our parents, standing there with wide, relieved smiles and open arms. They looked worn but healthy, their faces brightening as they caught sight of us. Emotions surged as Liv and I rushed to them, enveloped in long overdue hugs and words of love and relief. That night, as we sat together, recounting stories and laughing, I realized that this was what we had fought for, the chance to reunite, to heal, to start anew. And as I felt Liv's hand squeeze mine under the table, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it all together.